Friday night wasn't supposed to be complicated. Emily and I were heading to the Ivy, our usual spot where we met up with our circle of friends. Truth be told, I wasn't in the mood. Work had drained me, and the idea of staying home with a cold beer and mindless TV was far more appealing. But Emily was determined. "We need to get out more, Jack," she insisted, sliding into her sleek black dress and swiping on that bold red lipstick. Her tone left no room for discussion. By the time we walked in, the place was alive. The buzz of conversation and clinking glasses filled the air. Our usual group was gathered at the corner table. Chloe, Emily's overly dramatic best friend, Jason, the loud perpetual joker, and a few others who seemed to drift in and out of our social circle. As always, Emily was the center of attention. She breezed through conversations effortlessly, laughing just a little too loudly and leaning in a bit too close. She was magnetic, and she knew it. I tried to join in, but it felt like I didn't exist. My jokes fell flat, my attempts at conversation cut off, as Emily swooped in with sharper, wittier comments that turned everyone's focus back to her. Tonight, something felt off. Her laughter was more vibrant, her lingering touches more deliberate, and her eyes, they never met mine. Halfway through the night, I noticed her phone face down on the table. Every so often, it buzzed, soft but persistent. Each time, Emily's glance at it came paired with a small, secretive smile, a smile she hadn't shown me in months. "Who keeps texting you?" I asked, feigning casual curiosity. She didn't even glance up. "Work stuff." At this hour? Finally, she looked at me, her eyes cold and dismissive. "Deadlines don't clock out, Jack. Can we not?" I let it drop, though unease twisted in my gut. Then came the toast. Emily stood suddenly, her glass clinking as she tapped it with a spoon. The table quieted, all eyes on her, expecting one of her usual biting roasts or funny anecdotes. Instead, she raised her glass high and said, "To Jack, the man who, well, honestly puts up with far more than anyone should. Cheers to patience." The silence that followed was deafening. Jason forced a laugh, and the others joined in, but I couldn't move. Her words weren't lighthearted. They were a dagger wrapped in sarcasm. Everyone else saw a joke. I saw a jab. I wanted to call her out then and there, but their eyes were on me, waiting for my reaction. So, I faked a smile, lifted my glass, and swallowed both my drink and my pride. Inside, I was boiling. When Emily sat back down, I leaned in close. "What the hell was that?" She didn't flinch. "Relax, Jack. It's a joke. You need to lighten up." "Humiliating me in front of our friends is a joke?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. This time she grabbed it, thumbs moving quickly as she typed a response. "I need some air," I muttered, shoving back my chair. Outside, the night air hit me like a splash of water, cooling my skin but not the storm inside me. Was I overreacting? Maybe I was being paranoid. But that toast? It wasn't normal. Before I could untangle my thoughts, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. "Are you okay? You know I love you, right?" I stared at the words, my pulse quickening. They felt hollow, as if she were trying to pacify me rather than actually reaching out. For the first time, I didn't reply. Something was wrong. I could feel it, and I was going to figure out what. When I walked back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. It was like stepping into a room where everyone knew a secret, except me. Emily was back at the table, deep in conversation with Chloe, who kept sneaking glances at me with a mix of pity and something else. Amusement. Jason spotted me. "Jack, man, you look like you've seen a ghost. Grab a drink." I waved him off and headed straight to the bar, ordering whiskey. Something strong to calm my nerves. My eyes stayed on Emily. Her laughter carried over the crowd, sharp and deliberate, but it wasn't for me. And then I saw it. Chloe slid Emily's phone across the table. Emily glanced at the screen, just for a second, before flipping it face down again. She bit her lip, suppressing a smile. That did it. I pushed off the bar and marched over, my heart pounding. Leaning in, I said, "We're leaving. Now." Emily looked up, her expression blank. "We just got here. Don't be such a buzzkill." Chloe smirked over her drink. "Oh, let her have some fun, Jack. She works so hard." That pushed me too far. "Emily, let's go, or I will." With a dramatic roll of her eyes, Emily snatched up her purse. "Fine, if it's that important to you." We left without saying goodbye, Her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as we walked to the car, the silence between us suffocating. When we got in, she crossed her arms, staring out the window like a sulking teenager. "What the hell is going on, Emily?" I finally asked. She turned to me, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. The toast, the texts, the way you've been acting. What's going on?" Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "God, Jack, you're so paranoid. Not everything is about you." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "Then, what is it about? Because it sure feels like you're hiding something." She turned away, refusing to answer. The conversation was over. When we got home, Emily disappeared into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. I stood in the living room, staring at her purse, which she'd tossed carelessly onto the couch. My hands shook as I walked over. I don't know what possessed me, but I opened it. Her phone wasn't there, of course. She'd taken it with her. But her work tablet was. And it was unlocked. I hesitated. My conscience screamed at me to stop, but the small voice in my head, the one that already knew something was wrong, urged me on. I opened her messages. Nothing. Emails. Just work-related. I almost gave up until I saw it. An unfamiliar app. Innocuous and unremarkable. I tapped it open. And my blood ran cold. The first message stared back at me, clear as day, from an unknown number. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." Emily's reply, "Me too. Same time next week." My hands trembled as I scrolled up, the truth staring back at me, undeniable and brutal. The messages were clear, no room for doubt, no space for misinterpretation. Each line felt like a knife twisting, confirming what I had been too afraid to acknowledge. The bathroom door creaked open behind me. Emily stepped into the living room, a towel in her hands, drying them absent-mindedly. Her gaze froze on me, on the tablet I held. Her eyes darted to the screen, and her entire posture shifted, stiffening like a predator caught off guard. "What the hell are you doing?" she snapped, her voice sharp and edged with accusation. I stood, my chest heaving. The tablet still gripped tightly in my hands. I held it out, the incriminating messages glaring back at her, glowing like the proof of my worst fears. "This, Emily," I growled. "What the hell is this?" For a split second, her expression faltered. Something like guilt flashed across her face, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by icy detachment. Her arms crossed over her chest, her lips curling into that cruel, mocking smile. "Are you seriously going through my stuff now? God, Jack, you're pathetic." Her words hit me like a slap. My jaw clenched as anger bubbled to the surface. "Don't you dare turn this on me," I shot back, my voice low and threatening. "You've been lying to me, Emily. How long? Weeks? Months?" She didn't answer. The silence stretched between us like poison, suffocating the room. Finally, she shrugged, her voice cold and dismissive. "Does it matter?" Those 3 words shattered something inside me. I stared at her, barely able to comprehend what she had just said. "Does it matter?" I echoed, disbelief thick in my voice. "Of course it matters." Emily rolled her eyes as though I were being unreasonable. "You're overreacting, Jack. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" I felt the heat rise to my face, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You're sneaking around behind my back, messaging some guy, this, and you think it's not a big deal?" Her smirk returned, sharp and condescending. "Fine. You want the truth?" She paused, her voice dripping with venom. "Yes, I've been seeing someone. And honestly, I don't know why you're so shocked. You've been checked out for months." Her words felt like a punch to the gut. I staggered back a step, the weight of her accusation hitting me hard. "Checked out? Are you serious? I've been working myself to the bone to keep this life, to hold us together, and this is how you repay me?" I waved the tablet at her, shaking with anger. She shrugged again, unbothered. "Maybe if you'd paid a little more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere." Something inside me snapped. I slammed the tablet onto the coffee table, the sound exploding through the room like a gunshot. "Don't you dare put this on me, Emily. You made this choice. You decided to lie, to betray me. That's on you." Her expression didn't change. Her face was stone. "Spare me the self-righteous act, Jack. You're no saint. You've been so consumed with your precious job that you didn't even notice I was miserable. You don't talk to me. You don't make me feel wanted. What did you expect?" I stared at her, stunned. Unhappy? I repeated, my voice raw. You could have talked to me, Emily. Told me how you felt instead of blowing up our marriage because you were… what? Neglected? Emily laughed, a bitter, joyless sound that scraped against my nerves. Talk to you? Please. You don't listen, Jack. You nod, mumble a response, and go back to your emails or whatever's so important to you. Face it. We've been done for a while. You're just too blind to see it. Her words were knives, each one slicing deeper than the last. My legs gave out, and I sank into the armchair, staring at her like she was someone I no longer recognized. So that's it? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You've just decided we're done, and instead of telling me, you sneak around behind my back? Was it worth it, Emily? Was he worth it? For the first time, her confidence wavered. Her gaze darted away, her jaw tightening. I don't owe you an explanation. Like hell you don't, I shouted, pushing myself to my feet again. Who is he, Emily? Tell me. She hesitated, exhaling like she was already bored of the conversation. Fine. If you must know, it's Matt, from work. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Matt? My voice cracked with disbelief. I knew him, one of the marketing guys. She'd mentioned him a few times, always brushing him off as harmless, a bit of a dork. And now, he was this? Matt? I repeated, fists clenched, my anger teetering on the edge of explosion. That's who you're risking everything for? Him? Emily smirked. He listens to me, Jack. He makes me feel appreciated, something you clearly forgot how to do. Her words were poison, and I was drowning in it. Appreciated? I spat back. He's using you, Emily, just like you're using him. And when this all falls apart, don't come crawling back to me. Her face darkened, anger finally flashing in her eyes. You think you're so much better, don't you? Like you're some perfect husband. Newsflash, Jack, you're not. You're boring, predictable, exhausting. I needed something more. The floor beneath me felt like it was crumbling, taking everything I believed with it. My voice was quiet now, deadly calm. You've destroyed us, Emily. For what? For someone who's probably already planning his next fling? She shrugged again, that infuriating indifference back on her face. Maybe he is. Maybe he isn't. At least with him I feel alive. That word echoed in my head like a taunt. Alive. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady. Emily's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? I said get out, I repeated. Go to Matt. Go feel alive with him. Just get the hell out of my house. For a moment, she looked like she might argue, but then she grabbed her purse and keys, every movement deliberate, almost smug. Fine, I'll go. But don't think for a second this is all on me, Jack. You pushed me to this. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just stood there, watching as she walked out the door and slammed it behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. I sank back into the chair, my eyes falling on the tablet still sitting on the table. The messages glared back at me, a wound I knew would never heal. And for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly alone. The house was deathly silent the next morning. Emily's faint perfume still clung to the air, a cruel reminder that she had once shared this space, this life. Now she was gone, probably off to wherever Matt was. I hadn't slept. I spent the entire night replaying every word, every moment of our argument, the sharp edge of her indifference, that smirk, and the way she left, calm and deliberate, as though our marriage was just another petty inconvenience. It felt like she'd planned her exit for months, and I was only now catching up. By 7 a.m., I couldn't stand lying in bed any longer. I threw on an old hoodie and stumbled to the kitchen. The coffee pot sputtered weakly as it brewed, the sound filling the oppressive silence. I stood there staring blankly at it, my thoughts on an endless loop. Had I really been that blind? Had I missed all the signs? Or had Emily just become that good at lying? My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my daze. I grabbed it instinctively, a flicker of hope rising in me. For what? I wasn't sure. An apology? A shred of guilt? It wasn't. A message from Jason. Dude, are you okay? Last night was intense. I didn't reply. What could I say? Instead, I scrolled through my contacts and stopped on Chloe's name. Something about the way she smirked at the bar last night. The glances she shared with Emily. It all stuck with me. Chloe knew something. She had to. Before I could overthink it, I hit call. The phone rang, and Chloe's groggy voice answered. "It's early, what's up?" "You tell me," I said flatly. "You and Emily looked pretty cozy last night. Care to explain what the hell is going on?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Jack, I don't want to get involved in this. It's between you and Emily." "Don't give me that crap, Chloe." My voice rose despite my best effort. "You're her best friend. You knew about Matt, didn't you?" Another long silence. Then she finally said, "Look, Emily told me things in confidence. I didn't think it was my place to say anything." "So you just sat there smiling like the cat that swallowed the canary while she made me look like an idiot?" I snapped. Chloe groaned, clearly exasperated. "Jack, don't do this. You've got your side of the story, but Emily, she's been unhappy for a long time. You had to see this coming." The words hit like a sucker punch. "See it coming? What the hell are you talking about?" She felt ignored, Jack, like she didn't matter. You were so caught up in your own world that you didn't see hers falling apart. "That's no excuse," I growled, anger bubbling to the surface. "If she was unhappy, she should have talked to me instead of sneaking off with some sleazeball from work." "Maybe she should have," Chloe shot back, her tone sharper now. "But let's not pretend you're blameless here. Relationships take two, Jack." I couldn't take it anymore. "You know what? Forget it. Enjoy covering for her, Chloe. You're just as bad as she is." I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding like a drumbeat in my chest. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. Chloe's words echoed in my mind, mixing with Emily's from the night before. Was I really the problem? Had I missed something so obvious? But no. I shook the thought away. This wasn't on me. I didn't betray her. I didn't sneak around or humiliate her in front of our friends. Sure, I wasn't perfect, but I didn't deserve this. The anger surged again, and I scrolled down to Emily's contact. My finger hovered over the call button, torn between wanting to scream at her and demanding answers. Instead, I typed out a message. "You're going to come by and get your stuff. Tell me when. I don't want to see you, so make sure I'm not here." Her response came almost instantly. "I'll figure it out. Don't worry, I don't want to see you either." That one stung more than I expected. Even now, she couldn't show a single ounce of regret or kindness. I stared at the screen, the coffee in my mug, forgotten, growing cold. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something heavier than anger or betrayal. I felt grief. Grief for the life we'd built, for the woman I thought she was, for the version of myself who still believed in us, even when the cracks had started to show. As the morning sunlight streamed through the window, I realized this wasn't just the end of my marriage, it was the end of me, the man I'd been for the last 6 years. By midday, the house was as quiet as it had been all morning, but my mind refused to settle. I couldn't sit still. I scrubbed dishes that didn't need cleaning, folded laundry I didn't care about, anything to distract myself. But it didn't help. Every corner of the house was a trigger. Every room, every piece of furniture held a memory of Emily. Each one cut deeper than the last. The tablet sat on the coffee table like a ghost, its dark screen taunting me. But the messages, her words, were already etched into my brain. Last night was amazing. Same time next week? The thought made my hands shake all over again. She planned to keep this going. To her, our life together was nothing more than an inconvenience, a backdrop she could step out of whenever it suited her. I couldn't let it go. I picked up the tablet again and dove in. I scrolled through her apps, her emails, her calendar. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Answers, maybe. An explanation that would make this all make sense. And then I saw it. Her calendar. At first glance, the entries looked innocent. Little notes marked meeting, late dinner, office event. But as I scanned the dates, my stomach turned. They didn't line up with her schedule. These weren't work events. They were excuses. Cover-ups. The realization sank in like a stone. Emily had put effort into deceiving me, planning, covering her tracks, making sure I never caught on. And somehow, that was the worst part. The emails were mostly work-related, but a few stood out. One in particular caught my eye. It was from Matt. "Looking forward to tonight. Should we take separate cars again?" Then Emily's reply, "Yeah, can't have Jack getting suspicious, LOL." I nearly hurled the tablet across the room. It wasn't just the betrayal that gutted me. It was the mockery. She knew exactly what she was doing, and the worst part was, she didn't care. This wasn't only about the affair anymore. It was about me. about how little I seemed to matter to her, how easily she laughed about the lies she spun while I sat obliviously in the dark. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of the trance. It was Jason. "Dude, you sure you're okay? We're here if you need anything." Jason, the loyal friend who didn't know how deep the mess ran. I stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "Me? Not great, man, but thanks. I'll be fine." But I wouldn't be. Not for a long time. The rest of the day slipped by in a fog. I tried to eat, but couldn't keep anything down. My mind circled back to Emily, to the lies, to her cold, indifferent eyes as she walked out. How does someone who once claimed to love you become a stranger overnight? Late in the afternoon, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My chest tightened. She's not supposed to be back today. I wasn't ready. I hadn't cleared out the storm of emotions that still clawed inside me. The front door opened, and there she was, standing in the hallway as if nothing had happened. "I'm here to get my stuff," she said, her voice emotionless. I crossed my arms, staying planted where I stood. "You couldn't have called first?" She shot me a look, half irritation, half indifference. "I didn't think I needed your permission, Jack." "You didn't," I replied coldly, "but a heads up would have been nice. You made it pretty clear you didn't want to see me again, remember?" Emily shrugged, brushing past me like I wasn't even there. "I'll be quick." I followed her at a distance, unable to stop myself from watching her. She grabbed clothes mechanically from the closet, her expression unreadable. My mouth moved before I could stop it. "So that's it? No explanation? No apology? You just pack your bags like this is some casual breakup?" She froze for a second, a dress in her hands, before turning to me. "What do you want me to say, Jack? That I'm sorry? That I regret it? Because I don't. I did what I had to do." Her words sliced through me like shards of glass. "What you had to do? You mean lying to me? Humiliating me? Throwing everything away? For what? A fling?" Her gaze hardened and her voice grew colder. "You don't get it. This wasn't about Matt. This was about me. About me realizing I deserved to be happy. And you were never going to make me happy." Her words knocked the air out of me, the sledgehammer I never saw coming. "You think this is happiness?" I shot back, my voice shaking with disbelief. "Sneaking around, lying, destroying everything we built?" She turned away and tossed the dress into her suitcase, her back to me. "I didn't come here to fight, Jack. Just let me pack and leave." I clenched my fists at my sides, my voice trembling with fury. "You're a coward, Emily. You didn't do what you had to do. You took the easy way out. Instead of fixing things, you ran. And the worst part? You don't even care." For a moment, something cracked in her expression, a flicker of guilt. But she buried it just as quickly. "Believe what you want, Jack. I'm done explaining myself to you." She zipped up her suitcase, grabbed it, and walked past me without another word. I didn't follow. I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just stood there, frozen in place, listening to the sound of her car pulling away and disappearing into the distance. It was over. Really over. And yet, as I stared at the empty hallway where her suitcase had been, I realized something chilling. I didn't just lose Emily, I lost the illusion of who she was. And maybe that was what hurt the most. The silence she left behind wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The house felt like it was swallowing me whole. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders of her. Her favorite mug on the counter, the throw blanket draped over the couch, the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the curtains. I sat in the living room, staring at nothing, my thoughts spiraling into a storm of grief and rage. How did I miss this? How was I so blind to the cracks she claimed were there all along? Her words echoed in my head on a maddening loop. "You were never going to make me happy. I deserve to be happy." Like she was the victim. Like her betrayal was somehow justified because I wasn't enough. I needed to escape. Anything to stop the thoughts from tearing me apart. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and stepped into the cold evening air. It slapped me in the face, sharp and grounding. I drove aimlessly, the streets blurring into nothing, until I found myself parked outside a small bar. It wasn't the Ivy, thank God. Just a rundown place I'd never seen before. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and stale beer. I didn't care. I ordered a whiskey, took a corner booth, and stared into my glass as the burn spread through me. Against my better judgment, I pulled out my phone. I opened Emily's social media. Nothing. No cryptic quotes. No photos of her shiny new life. But that didn't mean she wasn't out there, already rewriting the narrative to suit herself. And then it hit me. Matt. I didn't hesitate. I searched for his profile. There he was, smug, smiling, the kind of guy who probably spent more time fixing his hair than doing any real work. His posts were as predictable as I expected. Gym selfies, marketing conferences, and motivational quotes that made my stomach turn. As I scrolled, something caught my eye, a post from last week. It was tagged at a restaurant I didn't recognize. The caption read, "Great night with even better company." And there it was. Emily's name, tagged in the comments, alongside a heart emoji. My grip tightened around the glass until I thought it might shatter. This wasn't some fleeting mistake. It was deliberate, planned. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. "Rough night?" a voice said, yanking me from my thoughts. I looked up to see the bartender, a middle-aged man with a face worn by life, standing near my table. He gestured toward my nearly empty glass. "You look like you could use another?" I gave a faint nod, and he returned with a fresh pour. "You want to talk about it?" he asked, leaning against the booth casually. Normally I would have brushed him off, but tonight I couldn't hold it in. "My wife cheated on me," I said bluntly. "Some guy from her office." He whistled low, shaking his head. "That's tough, man. Did you confront her?" "Oh, I did." The bitterness in my voice was unmistakable. She didn't even deny it, acted like it was my fault, like I drove her to it. The bartender's frown deepened, his expression turning hard. People like that don't know how to take responsibility. Easier to blame someone else. I nodded, his words a small balm, though they didn't dull the ache. "I don't even know what to do now. She's gone, but it doesn't feel over." The bartender tapped the table thoughtfully. "It won't feel over until you decide it is. People like her, they'll drag you down if you let them. Don't give her that power." His words stuck with me as I drained the last of my drink. For the first time that night, I felt something shift, a flicker of clarity. Emily had already taken so much from me, my trust, my peace, my stability. But she wasn't going to take my future. I left the bar with a resolve I hadn't felt in weeks. Battles still loomed ahead. Divorce papers, splitting assets, answering uncomfortable questions from friends and family. But one thing was certain. Emily had made her choice. Now it was my turn. I was done being a casualty in her story. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. Emily's words still echoed in my mind, but something had changed. She wasn't here to twist the narrative anymore, to manipulate my guilt and insecurities. This was my story now, and I had decisions to make. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. "I need to start the divorce process," I said, the words heavy but necessary. The lawyer, Claire, a no-nonsense professional who didn't waste time, listened as I laid it all out. Emily's affair. Her cold indifference, her lack of remorse. Claire didn't flinch. She'd clearly heard worse. "Gather any documents," she instructed, her voice brisk but reassuring. "Bank statements, joint accounts, property deeds, anything that ties you two together financially. If you have evidence of her infidelity, that'll help with negotiations." The evidence. Those messages from Matt, the texts on her tablet, they were more than enough. A small part of me hesitated. Was it cruel to use this against her? But then I remembered her laughing at my expense, treating me like a fool while she wove her lies. I wasn't going to play fair. Not anymore. With Claire's guidance, I spent the next few hours combing through our life together. Documents, emails, financial records. It was clinical, methodical, like dissecting the remains of a dead relationship. But it also felt empowering. For the first time, I was taking back control. The second step came next. I texted Jason. "Me. Need to talk. Can we meet?" Jason replied instantly. Jason. "Of course. My place in an hour." An hour later, I sat on his couch, spilling everything. For once, Jason's usual jokes were gone, replaced by quiet seriousness. When I finished, he shook his head in disbelief. "Man," he muttered, "I had no idea it was that bad." "Emily, she really did that to you?" "Yeah." I stared at the floor, my voice flat. "And she didn't even care. She left like it was just another day." Jason leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "That's cold, Jack. Really cold. But you know what? You're handling it better than I would have. I'd have lost it. I managed a weak smile. Oh, don't worry, I've had my moments. Jason hesitated before adding, You know Chloe's been acting weird too, right? I don't know if she's in on this whole thing, but something's off. My stomach twisted at the mention of Chloe, Emily's best friend, her confidant, the one who had smirked at me that night in the bar. Do you think she knew? I asked. Jason nodded slowly. If she didn't, I'd be shocked. Chloe and Emily are thick as thieves. If Emily was sneaking around, Chloe was probably covering for her. That settled it. Chloe was next. Later that afternoon, I called her. She picked up on the second ring, her voice overly bright, almost too cheerful. Well, if it isn't Jack, how's life in the drama zone? Cut the crap, Chloe, I said, my tone sharp. We need to talk. In person. Her playful tone faltered. Sure. What's this about? You know exactly what it's about. There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. Fine, meet me at the coffee shop on 5th. When I arrived, Chloe was already there, sipping an iced latte and scrolling through her phone as though she hadn't a care in the world. She looked up as I approached, her expression guarded. So, Chloe said, setting her drink down, what's on your mind? I didn't waste time. You knew, I said as I sat across from her. You knew about Emily and Matt, didn't you? Chloe didn't flinch. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her face unreadable. What if I did? She replied, her tone flat. What difference does it make now? My fists clenched under the table, my pulse pounding in my ears. It makes a difference because you helped her. You lied for her. You sat back and let her humiliate me, and you didn't say a damn thing. Chloe rolled her eyes with an exaggerated sigh. Jack, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Emily was miserable. She needed an escape. Did I agree with how she handled it? No. But it wasn't my place to intervene. Not your place, I said, my voice rising despite myself. You sat there laughing with her while she looked me in the face and lied. How is that not your place? Chloe leaned forward, her voice turning sharp and icy. Look, Jack, I get it. You're hurt. But maybe you should be asking yourself why Emily felt she couldn't be honest with you in the first place. Relationships don't fall apart for no reason. That was it. The last straw. I stood abruptly, glaring down at her. Defend her all you want, Chloe, but when this is over and she moves on to her next escape, don't come running back with excuses. You chose your side. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop, the sound of my footsteps cutting through the air. Outside, the cold wind hit me, but I hardly felt it. I hadn't just lost Emily. I'd lost Chloe too. Or maybe, I realized, I never really had her in the first place, but I didn't care anymore. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together, and I wasn't going to let anyone rewrite the story of what happened. The days after my confrontation with Chloe were a blur of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and something heavier. Determination. This wasn't just about surviving Emily's betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming the life she'd tried to take from me. I threw myself into the divorce process, and Claire moved quickly. She filed the paperwork, guided me through every step, and made sure I stayed on track. It felt like dismantling a life. Every account closed, every asset divided, every shared memory reduced to legal documents. But, as grueling as it was, it gave me something to focus on. The hardest part was the silence. Emily didn't call. She didn't text. It was as if I'd been erased from her life overnight. And maybe that was the part that stung the most, how easily she walked away, leaving nothing but chaos and unanswered questions. Then, one evening my phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? I answered, cautiously. Jack. Emily. My grip on the phone tightened. My chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. What do you want? Her voice was calm, detached, almost businesslike. Claire sent me the divorce papers. I wanted to let you know I'll be signing them. No need to drag this out. Her tone sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. That's it? I snapped. No explanation? No apology? Just a quick signature, and you're done? She sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. What do you want me to say, Jack? That I'm sorry? That I regret what happened? I don't. This was inevitable. Inevitable? I repeated, disbelief and rage twisting together in my voice. You cheated, Emily. You lied to me for months. And now you're acting like this was some natural progression, like I deserved it. There was silence. Then, finally, she spoke. I didn't call to fight. I called to make this easier. You wanted closure? Fine. I'm signing the papers. End of story. Closure? I laughed bitterly. You think signing a piece of paper gives me closure? You think it erases everything you've done? Her tone hardened. You're the one who wanted this over, Jack. Now it is. Stop dragging it out. It's pathetic. And then she hung up. I stood there, the silence of the ended call cutting deeper than anything she'd said. This wasn't indifference. It was cruelty. She wanted me to feel small, to feel powerless. And for a moment, I did. But only for a moment. After pacing the house for hours, her words still echoing in my head, something clicked. If Emily was so eager to move on, why call at all? Why not just sign the papers and vanish like she already had? And then it hit me. She wasn't in control anymore. Signing those papers wasn't just ending our marriage, it was severing her hold over me, and she couldn't stand it. That realization gave me strength. The next morning, I sat down with Claire and went over every detail of the settlement. Don't let her walk away unscathed, I said firmly. She doesn't get to destroy everything and keep her life intact. Claire nodded, her expression serious. We'll make sure this is fair, Jack, but be ready. If she's as cold as you say, she'll fight back. And she did. Emily contested everything, the house, the accounts, even the smallest shared assets. Her emails to Claire dripped with venom, accusing me of being spiteful and petty. But I didn't cave. Not this time. A week later, I got another call. This time, it was Chloe. I just thought you should know, she began, her voice oozing fake concern. Emily's been telling everyone you're trying to ruin her life. She says you're dragging out the divorce to punish her. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Of course she is. That's her MO, isn't it? Play the victim. Make everyone else the bad guy. Chloe hesitated, then tried again. Look, Jack, I know you're angry, but you don't know anything, Chloe, I snapped, cutting her off. You're just as complicit in this as she is, so don't call me pretending to care. Before she could respond, I hung up. That night, something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to let Emily, or anyone else, paint me as the villain. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my life. I opened my laptop and gathered every shred of evidence I had. Texts, emails, photos, compiling them into a single organized folder. This wasn't about revenge or hurting her. It was about protecting myself. I needed to ensure the truth was on my side in case she tried to twist the story any further. Once it was done, I leaned back in my chair and took a deep breath. The anger was still there. The pain lingered too. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of control. Emily could try to rewrite the narrative, but I wasn't going to let her. This wasn't the ending she wanted, but it was the one she earned. 2 weeks later, the divorce negotiations hit their boiling point. True to form, Emily wasn't just fighting for what she believed she deserved, she was fighting to control the story. Her lawyer fired off an email, accusing me of being vindictive and unreasonable, dragging things out just to make her miserable. I forwarded the message to Claire, my lawyer, with a short instruction. Use everything we've got. Claire didn't hesitate. The next day, she filed the evidence, screenshots of Emily's messages with Matt, calendar inconsistencies that blew holes in her work schedule, and even financial records showing joint savings mysteriously drained for what were clearly their little escapades. By the end of the week, everything changed. Emily's tone softened, and her lawyer sent a counter-proposal, noticeably less aggressive. Claire smirked as she read it. Looks like someone's had a change of heart. But for me, it wasn't over yet. This wasn't about money or property anymore. This was about the truth. That Friday, Jason and a few friends invited me over for dinner. They called it a chance to take my mind off things, though I knew they were curious about the drama too. I was hesitant. The thought of facing everyone felt exhausting. Still, I went. Jason greeted me at the door with his signature bear hug. Good to see you, man. You're looking better, more alive. Thanks, I replied with a small, tired smile, surviving one day at a time. As the evening wore on and the wine started flowing, the conversation inevitably shifted to Emily. Jason was the first to bring it up, lowering his voice like he was sharing classified intel. Chloe's been running her mouth, he said, glancing at me. Apparently Emily's telling people you're out for blood. Let her talk, I said, leaning back in my chair. She's got nothing left to stand on. Jason raised an eyebrow. You sound calm about it. I've got receipts. I said flatly, earning a round of quiet laughter. Then Lisa chimed in, her tone casual but eyes sharp. You know, I ran into Matt the other day. The room fell silent. She swirled her wine glass and continued. He didn't look happy. Said things with Emily weren't exactly working out. I sat up straighter. What do you mean? Lisa shrugged. He didn't go into details, just said it's complicated. But he didn't look like a man in love. A surge of satisfaction rolled through me. It was almost poetic. Emily had thrown everything away for Matt, and now even that was falling apart. Jason leaned forward, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Speaking of receipts, he said, pulling out his phone. Check this out. He handed it over, and my jaw tightened as I read the message on the screen. It was from Chloe. Emily's freaking out. Jack's got her backed into a corner. She thinks he's going to ruin her reputation. Jason smirked. Looks like she's sweating. I handed the phone back, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Emily was unraveling, and while part of me wanted to revel in her downfall, another part, the part that remembered the good years, felt hollow. A few days later, I got a call from Emily. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. What do you want? I asked, my tone colder than I intended. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Jack, can we talk? In person. Why? I asked, suspicion creeping in. Because, she hesitated, I owe you an apology. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a park we used to visit back when things were good. She looked different, more subdued. The confidence, the sharpness, it was gone. I've been thinking, she started quietly, her gaze fixed on the ground. About everything. I was wrong. About you. About us. I folded my arms across my chest, making her work for it. Took you long enough. She flinched but pushed on. I don't expect you to forgive me. I needed to say I'm sorry. For the lies, for the way I treated you, for everything. For a moment I couldn't respond. This was the apology I had been waiting for. But now that it was here, it felt empty. I appreciate the apology, I said finally, my voice steady. But it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, Emily. Now we both have to live with them. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. I know, you don't get to rewrite this, I said, cutting her off. Not now. Her expression crumbled, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret. But it didn't matter anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, just a ghost of the woman I once loved. As I drove home, an unexpected sense of peace settled over me. Emily had reduced our life to ashes, but from those ruins, I was beginning to rebuild. This time, stronger and for myself alone. The divorce was finalized quietly, without courtroom dramatics or fiery arguments. Just a few signatures, a handful of emails exchanged between lawyers, and it was over. Claire's email confirming the finalization arrived late that afternoon. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. Something I had fought so hard to preserve was now officially gone. But instead of sorrow, I felt relief. A weight I had carried for years had finally lifted. The first thing I did was reclaim the house. I packed up every trace of Emily. Clothes she hadn't bothered to collect, her little keepsakes, even the framed photos I had avoided for months. By the end of the day, the house felt emptier, yet it also felt like mine for the first time. I donated most of her things, though one box, taped shut and labeled with her name, sat in the corner of the garage. If she wanted it, she knew where to find it. If not, it would sit there until I either dealt with it or forgot it existed. With the house reclaimed, I turned my attention to myself. I started going to the gym again, initially just to burn off the anger and frustration. But soon, it became something more. I began to feel stronger. Physically, yes, but mentally too. Each rep felt like a small victory. Each mile on the treadmill a step further from the man I had been with her. I also reconnected with friends I'd let drift away during the marriage. Jason, true to his word, made sure I didn't isolate myself, dragging me to social events and keeping me grounded. One evening over beers, he grinned at me and said, "Told you there's life after Emily." For the first time in ages, I smiled back. You were right. A few weeks later, just as I was starting to find my footing, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. Jack, it's Matt. Can we talk? I stared at the screen, stunned. Of all the people I expected to hear from, Matt was at the bottom of the list. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Me. What could you possibly have to say to me?" "Matt, please, I just need 5 minutes." Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop nearby. I had no idea what to expect. When I arrived, Matt was already sitting there. He looked nothing like the smug man I remembered. His shoulders sagged, his face pale and drawn. He looked utterly defeated. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "Make it quick," I replied, my arms crossed. He nodded, rubbing his neck nervously. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." He hesitated, eyes fixed on the table. "I didn't know Emily was married at first, and when I found out, I should have walked away. But I didn't." I said nothing, letting the silence weigh on him. "She lied to me too, he continued, bitterness creeping into his voice. "Made me think you were this horrible husband, that she was trapped in a miserable marriage. I believed her because I wanted to." My jaw tightened, but I stayed silent. "And now," he said with a hollow laugh, "I see who she really is. She's already moved on to someone else, left me, just like she left you." His words were vindicating, but I didn't let it show. "What did you expect, Matt?" I said finally, my voice cold. "That she'd cheat with you but never cheat on you?" He flinched, the truth landing harder than he expected. "I guess I deserved that," he muttered quietly. "Yeah," I replied, standing up. "You did. But it's not my job to forgive you. That's your problem, not mine." I turned and walked out, leaving him there, a shell of the man who had played a part in destroying my marriage. That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time in months, I felt like I could truly breathe. The anger and bitterness were still there, but they no longer controlled me. Emily was gone, the life we had built was gone, but I was still standing, and for the first time, that felt like enough. I didn't have all the answers, and I wasn't sure what the future would look like. But one thing was certain. I wasn't the man who had stood by while Emily tore my life apart. I was stronger now, wiser, and ready to rebuild. This wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one I needed. As I watched the final rays of sunlight fade, a quiet realization settled over me. The best parts of my story were still ahead of me.